shattered their marriage with a microphone in his hand and the world watching. The Grand Axis Tech Gala buzzed with champagne laughter, velvet gowns, and starched tuxedos. Golden spotlights danced across the ballroom ceiling like crown jewels, while camera flashes popped like fireworks. On stage, Xavier Langston stood tall, smooth in a custom midnight suit, the polished sheen of power in every gesture. His wife Amira stood beside him, poised, regal, radiant in crimson satin. Her curls glistened under the chandelier like coiled fire. She held his arm with effortless grace, a perfect picture of unity, until he spoke. "I want to thank the woman who stood by me through it all," Xavier began, his voice amplified to every corner. "My wife Amira has been my rock." Applause erupted. But then came the twist. "And now, as we step into new beginnings, we've decided to part ways." Silence crashed through the ballroom. Xavier added, "Amira and I are getting divorced amicably." Gasp. Confusion. Flashbulbs. Amira didn't flinch. No trembling lips. No tears. Just a slow, deliberate smile that chilled the air like a dropped crystal flute. She reached for the mic, her tone velvet and unwavering. "Thank you, Xavier. I wish you clarity in your next chapter." The audience blinked, stunned by her composure. But as she stepped down in silence, clutch in hand, she was already 10 moves ahead. Sometimes a smile is sharper than a blade. Backstage, Amira kicked off her stilettos in the green room while her assistant Layla stood frozen. "He actually did it." On stage, Layla whispered. Amira responded with a slight shrug, pulling her phone from her clutch. A quick text, "Initiate phase 1." Then she exhaled, like a woman who had just shut the final door of her past. 3 months earlier, she had seen the first text message on Xavier's smartphone, a flirtatious ping from his VP of brand strategy, Tori Graham. Last night was unforgettable. Does she suspect? That was the night everything shifted. Amira hadn't yelled. She hadn't packed her bags. Instead, she began to build a kingdom. Of her own quietly, methodically. She remembered how Xavier once told her, "No one likes a power-hungry woman." She had smiled, folded his pocket square, and filed the quote away like evidence. Amira didn't get mad. She got strategic. And tonight, the world thought they had witnessed her unraveling. But they hadn't seen the warboard in her study, or the names, dates, and offshore accounts pinned in perfect alignment. This wasn't the beginning of the end. It was the end of pretending. He wore betrayal like a tailored suit, pressed, polished, and dripping in arrogance. Amira stood in the dim light of her walk-in closet the night after the announcement, fingertips brushing against the cufflinks Xavier had left behind on her vanity, gold-plated, monogrammed, a gift from her once. The irony burned. He had strutted across that stage like a victor, but it was built on illusions, stitched with her silent labor. 10 years ago, when Langston Tech was just a garage startup, Amira had pored over legal documents until dawn, contracts, and coded security firewalls, while Xavier pitched to investors over cocktails. Her law degree collected dust as she became the ghostwriter of their empire's success, and when she suggested a seat at the executive table, "Supportive wives don't need titles," he'd said. She wasn't heartbroken anymore. She was done. Amira pulled out a file from her hidden safe. Inside copies of the original AI patents, her handwritten notes, and the co-ownership clause. She insisted on inserting. Xavier had forgotten that, but she hadn't. She never would. The kingdom he thought he owned had her fingerprints buried in its foundation. And soon, she'd remind him. The other woman thought she'd won. But queens don't play checkers with pawns. Tori Graham sipped a rose spritzer in her glass-walled office. Giddy as her name began appearing in gossip blogs. VP turned power player. One headline said, she crossed her legs, admiring her own reflection. She thought Xavier had chosen her. That Amira was out of the picture. That she'd finally made it. But across town, Amira sat with her financial advisor and 2 private investigators. Her laptop screen glowed with offshore account maps, insider emails, and metadata that placed Tori at Xavier's private retreats long before the public separation. Amira didn't care about the affair itself. She cared about ethics violations, stock manipulation, and breach of contract. Tori wasn't a rival. She was leveraged at when Xavier's company's stock dipped 3% after a mysterious leak about inappropriate executive relations. Tori panicked. She didn't know Amira had orchestrated the leak with surgical precision. This wasn't vengeance, it was recalibration. And pawns who danced in the king's bed rarely saw the queen's shadow moving behind them. Every empire built on arrogance forgets the architect. In a discreet conference room with floor-toozling windows, Amira faced a seasoned legal team. Her voice was calm, her notes meticulous. The company's foundational tech sensor core AI was developed in our second year. I wrote the initial legal framework in patent language, she stated. One lawyer flipped through documents. Eyebrows rising, they found her initials in old filings. Her email time-stamped in the prototype archive, and even code annotations in her handwriting. Xavier had buried her contributions under PR spin and flashy press tours. But the law remembered. Paper remembered. Truth remembered. She still held 38% of legal leverage in Ki Pezinov to force a board vote as the lawyers began drafting motions. Amira leaned back in her chair. She wasn't just reclaiming what was hers. She was shifting the tectonic plates beneath Langston Tech. The press still saw a graceful ex-wife, but soon they'd see a storm. A black woman unbending, unbroken, and unapologetically coming for her crown. She didn't demand a seat, she built her own damn table. The Langston Tech boardroom pulsed with tension. 12 executives lined the mahogany table, eyes flicking between each other like nervous birds. At the head sat Xavier, flanked by Tori, freshly promoted and smug in her cherry-red blazer. But when the doors opened and Amira walked in, silence. Thickened like fog. She was radiant. Jet black silk pantsuit, gold hoops that shimmered like defiance, and a presence that shifted the room's gravity. She handed a thick folder to the company's lead counsel. Per the co-founder clause in your bylaws, she began, voice like steel dipped in velvet. I'm calling for a formal review of leadership competency and ethical governance. Xavier's mask cracked for a fraction of a second. He hadn't thought she'd fight, especially not like this. Amira didn't flinch. The room felt her weight. She wasn't there to be pitied. She was there to be reckoned with. When she sat down at the far end of the table, crossing one leg over the other, a ripple shifted through the board. No one said it out loud, but they felt it. Power was being redistributed. He underestimated her silence, but silence doesn't mean surrender. Xavier paced the rooftop of his downtown penthouse, the skyline flickering like static behind him. His phone buzzed 3 missed calls from shareholders, one from his PR team, and an encrypted email from legal. Amira had filed an official claim to co-creator status. If upheld, it would force him to relinquish a portion of his executive control. She's bluffing, Tori said beside him, too quickly. Her voice sounded less confident than usual. You said she didn't want the company. Xavier didn't respond. The truth clawed at the edge of his mind. Mira wasn't bluffing. She'd played the long game. Every dinner she hosted, every gala she smiled through, every sacrifice she made was an archive of patience. Amira had learned the art of invisible power, and now she was visible, rising like smoke, undeniable. She wasn't fighting for him. She was fighting for legacy. For the version of herself he tried to edit out of the narrative. The world wasn't just watching. It was choosing sides. And Xavier could feel which way the wind was turning. When the spotlight shifts, shadows grow hungry. Tori walked into her office that Monday, only to find a box on her desk. HR had placed her on administrative leave, pending an investigation, due to concerns regarding executive conduct and policy breaches. Her vision blurred as she sank into her chair. This wasn't what she bargained for. 2 weeks ago, she was the rising stars of years future. Now, she was the headline scandal. Amira hadn't spoken her name publicly, but her silence cut deeper than shame. Tori flipped through the internal memo, the timeline, the leaked messages, the financial conflicts. It was precise, calculated, across the city. Amira sipped her jasmine tea in a glass-walled cafe, reviewing media responses on her tablet. A new article read, From Betrayed Wife to Boardroom Warrior, Amira Langston's Quiet Rise. Her smile was small, but her eyes were fierce. Tori wasn't the enemy, just another symbol of a system that thought beauty could outmaneuver brilliance. But Amira knew better. She'd seen the entire chessboard, and the queen. She moved without needing permission. It wasn't revenge. It was restoration. Amira stood at the podium of the Black Women in Tech conference, her story already trending before she opened her mouth. She hadn't spoken publicly until now. Cameras clicked, phones recorded. The audience leaned in. For years, I helped build a company from the ground up. My labor was labeled support, my intellect hidden behind another name. But today, I stand not as a footnote, but as a founder. Applause thundered. Amira's voice didn't rise, it resonated. Power is not about domination. It's about legacy. It's about knowing who you are, even when others try to silence your blueprint. Backstage, young women wiped away tears. Girls in braids and blazers saw themselves in her. She wasn't just fighting Xavier. She was unshackling a generation of quiet builders. This wasn't about one marriage or one company. It was about rewriting the rules. And from this moment on, Amira Langston wasn't just a name. She was a movement. Even kings can choke on their own crowns. Xavier's office was colder, now physically and metaphorically. His reflection stared back at him from the tinted glass, but he barely recognized the man looking back. PR disasters, internal audits, board mistrusted, all unraveled too fast. Shareholders had called an emergency vote. Amira's evidence, paired with her silent stake, was undeniable. The board didn't care about scandals, they cared about stability, and Amira offered that. Grace under fire, a plan, a vision. He thought he'd broken her on stage, but what he really did was set her free. When the final vote removed him, as CEO, Xavier sat alone, palms clenched. His kingdom wasn't stolen, it was surrendered. Brick by brick, he handed it away, too arrogant to see it. Meanwhile, the woman he dismissed as background was now on every business cover in the country. Amira hadn't just survived the betrayal. She had transformed it into a throne. You don't ask for your name, back you, engrave it in legacy. Amira's heels clicked softly against the marble as she entered the newly renamed Langston Innovation Hub. The space she once helped design as supportive wife now bore her vision, her strategy, her leadership. Behind her, murals of pioneering Black women in tech stretched across the lobby walls, vibrant and unapologetically powerful. The room smelled of fresh paint and promise. Mrs. Langston, her assistant said, handing her the final press release. For approval, she read it in silence. At the bottom, a line read, "Founded by Amira Langston, where disruption meets dignity." She nodded upstairs. She led her first executive meeting. No theatrics, no revenge speeches, just clarity, direction, power that didn't scream, it guided. Her staff watched in awe as she made her decisions, her strategy seamless. What Xavier thought was emotional overreach was, in fact, genius withheld. And now it was fully unleashed. The fall isn't the end, it's where the real story begins. Tori stood outside the nonprofit women's center she once mocked as PR fluff. Now, she held a folder of job applications in shaking hands. Her designer bag felt heavier without purpose. She wasn't sleeping, not because of guilt, but because of clarity. She was used, a pawn in Xavier's chess game. And when she was no longer shiny, he disappeared. Inside, a volunteer offered her coffee and a quiet smile. "Everyone falls," the woman said, "but it's what you do with the pieces that counts." Tori blinked back tears. She took a seat in a resume workshop, surrounded by other women, some escaping abuse, others chasing dreams. It humbled her. No camera flashes, no titles, just truth. Her phone buzzed. A social media post from a company highlighting scholarships for women in tech. Tori exhaled. Maybe she wasn't the villain. Just ... misguided. And maybe, just maybe, redemption was possible if she chose to own her part. You can hide your sins from the world, but not from your children. Xavier hadn't spoken to his daughter, Layla, in weeks. When he finally showed up at her dorm, she didn't run to hug him. She stood in the doorway, arms folded, disappointment woven into her silence. "You embarrassed us," she said flatly. "You humiliated Mom?" Xavier tried to explain, spinning it as a mistake, as things between adults. But Layla wasn't a child anymore. She'd watched her mother rebuild herself from ashes. "You didn't just betray her. You betrayed us. You were supposed to be the example." Xavier's shoulders sagged. He'd lost more than a title. He lost the only people who ever loved him unconditionally. Layla turned back inside. "You can leave the flowers," she said without looking back, "but don't come back until you remember who you were before all this power poisoned you." And with that, Xavier was left with silence. The kind that doesn't just echo at convicts. Power doesn't knock, it walks in and changes the room. Amira sat for her first national interview on a glass stage with city lights sparkling behind her. "You were humiliated live on stage," the host began. "How did you stay so calm?" She smiled faintly. "When you know who you are, chaos doesn't define you. It reveals others." The audience held their breath. "I didn't retaliate," Amira continued. "I strategized. I didn't burn it all down. I built something new. For women. For those who were overlooked. For myself," the host asked, "do you forgive Xavier?" A pause. Then, "I don't need to. That chapter isn't mine anymore." Applause erupted. Amira didn't blink. She wasn't there to play saint or victim. She was something else now. Something rarer. A woman who had walked through betrayal and turned it into blueprint. The best revenge is building a future that no longer includes your enemies. Amira walked through the children's coding camp sponsored by her foundation. Laughter echoed. Tiny fingers typed with determination. This wasn't just charity. It was legacy. It was possibility planted early. One young girl tugged on her sleeve. "Are you the lady from the news?" Amira knelt down. "I am. You look like me," the girl whispered. "Can I be like you?" Amira's throat tightened. She placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. "You can be even more." Later that night, she sat on her balcony sipping tea. Below, the city pulsed with life. She had no desire to watch Xavier fall anymore. He was already irrelevant. Her kingdom wasn't built on destruction. It was built on renewal. This wasn't just survival. It was transformation. And she was just getting started. Power isn't taken with noise, it's taken with signatures. Xavier strutted into the boardroom of Langston Global, expecting obedience. His tailored suit couldn't mask the unease, flickering behind his forced smirk. The room, once his stage, felt colder, distant, controlled. "Let's begin," he said, reaching for the agenda. But the chair was already taken. Amira turned slowly. "From the head of the table. Actually, we've already begun." Her voice was calm. Final documents slid across the table. Shares quietly bought. Allies silently courted. She had outmaneuvered him with the same precision he once used to cheat her. "You no longer hold a controlling interest," she said simply. "You're relieved of your executive duties." Xavier looked around. No one met his eyes. The man who once humiliated her in public had just been dethroned in private by the woman he underestimated. The most dangerous woman is one who no longer fears the spotlight. Amira stepped onto the stage in a deep emerald power suit, her natural curls coiled like a crown. Cameras clicked wildly. Lights flared. She didn't flinch. "Thank you for coming," she began, steady and slow. "Today, we redefine what leadership looks like." She unveiled a new initiative, a $10 million fund for minority women in STEM. The crowd gasped. This wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. About creating doors where there were once only walls. A reporter raised a hand. "Any words for your ex-husband?" Amira's eyes didn't flicker. "Wish him peace. But this kingdom has no room for old kings." The video clip would go viral in minutes. But Amira didn't care for headlines. She cared for legacy. And hers had just begun. Some battles don't need words, just distance. Xavier sat alone in his penthouse, glass in hand, the silence deafening. The TV showed Amira's triumphant speech on loop. Investors pulled out. His name trended, but for all the wrong reasons. He dialed her number out of habit. then froze. What could he say? I'm sorry, too late, I didn't know. A lie, he tossed the phone. His reflection in the glass stared back, colder warned. Irrelevant. Down below, Amira's city glowed, and for the first time, Xavier realized she wasn't his shadow. She had always been the light, and he had. You can't rewrite the past, but you can choose how the next page turns. Tori stood in front of a small classroom, now a junior coding instructor for the foundation she once mocked. The kids laughed at her jokes, typed clumsily, and beamed when she praised them. One girl whispered, "Miss Tori, were you famous?" Tori smiled. "Not in the way that matters, but I'm trying to be now." Later that night, she emailed Amira, a real message. No apologies, just gratitude. "Thank you for not destroying me when you could have. I want to earn the second chance you gave me." Amira never replied, but the donation receipt came in 2 days later to fund Tori's community coding program. That was Amira's way of answering. No theatrics, just quiet grace. Some women don't wait for the crown, they forge it themselves. Amira stood on the rooftop of her newest tech hub. Below, her foundation's banner swayed in the wind, where black women build the future. The stars above sparkled, but none brighter than the fire in her eyes. She had risen without dragging, built without begging, reigned without revenge. Behind her, Layla wrapped her arms around her waist. "Mom, ... you really did it." "No, baby," Amira whispered, brushing Layla's hair back. "We did it." She looked out at the skyline, every tower lit, every billboard glowing with her company's logo. She didn't just survive betrayal, she built a kingdom from it. The past always knocks just to see if you'll answer. Xavier. Sudden hospitalization made headlines. Heart palpitations. Stress-induced collapse. Amira read the news in passing, sipping green tea in her sunlit office. Her assistant paused. "Should I send flowers?" Amira shook her head slowly. "No, send silence." But that night, in the privacy of her study, she remembered the man he used to be. Before the lies, before the power, she typed out a message, then deleted it instead. She sent a donation in his mother's name to the hospital's heart unit, anonymous. Because true power wasn't in revenge, it was in restraint. Every empire faces a test. Hers came wrapped in a $200 million offer. A global tech conglomerate wanted to buy Amira's company. Full acquisition, no leadership role, just wealth and silence. Her team was divided. The number made jaws drop. Xavier, watching from the sidelines, expected her to take the payout and disappear. Amira stepped into the conference room, head held high. "Let me be clear. This company wasn't built to be sold. It was built to stand." She slid the offer, led her back across the table. "I didn't come this far to wear someone else's crown." They left stunned. She left certain red carpets used to be her husband's world. Tonight, it was hers. Amira arrived at the annual Tech Women's Gala in a custom gold gown that shimmered like fire. Paparazzi screamed her name. Cameras begged for a quote. She gave them more. "Tonight, we don't celebrate survival. We celebrate sovereignty." She was named Innovator of the Year. Layla joined her on stage. Xavier sat somewhere in the back, uninvited, unseen, undone. As she held the trophy, a single tear fell. Not for him, not for the pain, but for the girl she used to be, the one who thought love was the highest form of power. Now she knew better. When kings fall, queens rise. But the true win, becoming a kingmaker, Tori's nonprofit bloomed. Several of Amira's mentees launched their own startups. One, a 19-year-old prodigy, raised $5 million in funding. Amira sat in the back row during the pitch event, sunglasses on, smiling quietly, watching the next generation take the stage. She didn't need to speak, didn't need to shine. She had become the root, not just the flower. Power had never been about headlines. It was about planting legacy in people, one woman, one girl, one broken story at a time. The betrayal was his, but the kingdom was always hers. On the 5th anniversary of her foundation, Amira walked through the new campus, named after her grandmother. Wind rustled the trees planted by the very girl she once mentored. Layla, now a fierce teen, ran to her, holding a plaque. "Mom, they want to rename the scholarship after you." Amira smiled. "Only if they spell my name right, Queen Amira." Laughter, applause, a quiet pride. And as the sun dipped behind the towers she built, Amira stood tall not as a scorned woman, but as a crowned architect of her own kingdom, no longer broken, never again betrayed. Thank you for watching. Please let us know where you are watching from, so we can say thanks. Please don't forget to subscribe.